Hello and welcome to Sleepy Mooney. I'm so glad you're here tonight. This is your place to rest, to unwind, and to let the day gently fade away. Before we begin, take a moment to notice yourself in this moment. Notice the time of day around you. Perhaps the sun is high and bright. Perhaps the afternoon is quiet and still. Perhaps night has already fallen and the world outside your window is dark and hushed. Wherever you are, however you arrive, this story is here to carry you gently forward. Adjust yourself so you are comfortable. Feel the weight of the pillow beneath your head, the soft embrace of the blanket around you, the steady ground that holds you. Allow your muscles to loosen. Let your arms grow heavy. Let your legs sink. There is no task left for you tonight. No duty waiting. No burden to carry. This is your time. Take a deep breath in, slow and calm. Hold it for a gentle moment, then release it, letting your breath sigh away. Again, breathe in long and smooth, and exhale even slower, as though the air itself has grown heavy and needs time to drift away. With every breath, feel your body sink deeper into rest. Feel the space around you soften. If thoughts appear, let them pass. Do not reach for them. Do not follow them. Simply notice them as though they were leaves floating down a stream, drifting past, moving on, disappearing from sight. Tonight, we will walk together into stories that have lived for thousands of years. Stories that have been whispered beneath ancient skies, told beside glowing fires, carried on the breath of sailors across dark seas, and remembered through generations. These stories have waited for you, and tonight they will guide you, gently, into calm, into stillness, and into sleep. Now imagine the air of a quiet night, warm and soft, wrapping itself around you. Look up in your mind to see the stars, faint and patient, each one holding a story. A breeze moves against your skin, cool and tender. Beneath you, the earth feels steady, strong, and safe. Let the silence grow deeper. Let the calm of the stories yet to come fill you with ease. You are safe. You are still. You are ready. And now, we begin with the tale of Demeter and Persephone. Long ago, in the earliest days of the world, there was a goddess named Demeter. She was the goddess of the harvest, and her very presence was life. When her footsteps touched the soil, seeds awoke and stretched toward the sun. When her hands brushed the branches, fruit swelled and ripened. When her breath moved across a field, stalks of wheat rose, tall and golden, bending under the weight of their abundance. Mortals loved her dearly, for she filled their baskets and their bellies, and they sang her name in gratitude at every feast. But Demeter's greatest joy was not the gifts she gave to mortals. Her greatest joy was her daughter, Persephone. Persephone was the light of Demeter's life. She was laughter that rang out across meadows. She was curiosity that lingered over each flower, each bird, each small wonder of the earth. When she walked, blossoms seemed to lean toward her as though reaching for her attention. Her hair was crowned with garlands she wove from wildflowers, and her hands were always busy plucking blooms, tucking them into her braid, or scattering petals in her wake. Demeter watched her daughter with pride and love so deep it filled her like sunlight fills the sky. One bright morning, Persephone wandered into a meadow, more beautiful than any she had yet explored. The air was warm. The grass was tall, waving softly like the sea. Flowers grew in a riot of colors, violets and lilies, roses and irises, each one glowing in the sunlight. She bent to gather blossoms, her hands full of color and fragrance. She laughed, her voice ringing through the field like bells. And then the earth began to tremble. At first it was gentle, as though the ground was shifting in its sleep. Then it grew stronger, the soil shaking beneath her feet, the flowers quivering as though in alarm. Before Persephone could move, the meadow split open. A chasm yawned wide, and from its depths rose a chariot black as night, pulled by horses whose hooves struck sparks, whose eyes burned like embers. At the reins stood Hades, lord of the underworld. He was not thunderous, he was not cruel, he was quiet, solemn, inevitable. His eyes, dark and steady, fell upon Persephone, and in that gaze the course of her life changed forever. With swift, unyielding strength, Hades lifted her into his chariot. The earth closed behind them, sealing the meadow as though it had never opened. The flowers bowed their heads, the air grew still, and silence filled the field. When Demeter discovered her daughter was gone, grief struck her like a storm. She lit a torch and began to wander the earth, searching. She walked across mountains and through valleys. She crossed rivers and oceans. By day and by night her torch burned, a flame of sorrow and of hope. She asked every god, every spirit, every mortal, "Have you seen her? Have you seen my child?" But no one could give her the answer she sought. As Demeter wandered, her grief spread through the world. Fields refused to yield. Seeds hid in the earth, cold and unmoving. Rivers slowed to a trickle. Trees dropped their fruit too soon. Hunger began to creep through villages and cities. The air itself seemed dimmer, thinner, heavy with loss. Mortals cried out not only in their own hunger, but in compassion for the goddess who grieved. The world grew quiet, waiting for her joy to return, waiting for life to awaken again. At last, it was Helios, the sun who sees all, who revealed the truth. He told Demeter that Persephone had been taken into the underworld by Hades. Demeter's sorrow deepened into a still, cold anger. She would not let the earth flourish until her daughter was returned. Zeus, ruler of the gods, saw the suffering of mortals and sent Hermes, swift messenger, to the underworld. Hermes flew down into the realm of shadow and pleaded with Hades. He told him of the barren fields, the starving mortals, the silence that now covered the living world. Hades, solemn and steady, agreed that Persephone could return to her mother, but there was a binding truth. Persephone, in her time below, had eaten 6 seeds of the pomegranate, sweet, red, glistening, like drops of blood. To eat of the underworld is to belong to it, at least in part, and so it was decreed. For 6 months of each year, Persephone would return to her mother, and the earth would bloom, fields would fill, rivers would run, and the world would know spring and summer. For the other 6 months, she would dwell with Hades in the underworld. And during those months, the earth would grow quiet, leaves would fall, the air would turn cold, and the world would rest in autumn and winter. Thus the seasons were born. The cycle of life, of growth, of death, and of renewal. And so when you feel the warmth of spring, when you see the fields grow green and the flowers bloom, you can remember Persephone's return, the joy of a mother's embrace, the laughter of a child returned to light. And when the world grows still, when the nights grow long, when the air grows cold, you can remember her descent and the patience of a mother waiting, torch in hand, for the spring to come again. Orpheus and Eurydice. There was once a man named Orpheus. He was not a warrior. He was not a king. He did not rule armies or build cities. His gift was gentler, quieter, yet more powerful than steel or stone. Orpheus was a musician. From the time he was a boy, the lyre never left his hands. When he played, the strings carried his soul into the air. His music was not only sound, it was a kind of light, a warmth that spread into the hearts of all who heard. Birds paused in flight, listening. Trees swayed in rhythm. Even rivers seemed to hush, their waters slowing to hear his melodies. He grew, and so too did his gift. His name became known, not for conquest, but for harmony. And in time, he met Eurydice. Eurydice was a woman of grace, of quiet joy. Her laughter was soft, like the sound of water running gently over stones. When she walked, she seemed to move as though in step with the world itself, part of its natural rhythm. She and Orpheus were drawn to each other not in fire and thunder, but in a steady, tender glow. They were in love. Their days were simple. They walked meadows together. They rested beneath trees while Orpheus played. He sang for her, not for the world, and in her presence his music became more tender still. Where they went, the earth itself seemed calmer, as though joy in its purest form had settled for a time. But joy is not always eternal. One day, Eurydice wandered through tall grass, light on her feet, her mind turned to flowers and sky. A serpent, hidden in the shadows, struck her ankle. Its bite was swift, its venom cold. She fell, her laughter silenced. Her breath faded from her lips. Her eyes closed, and she slipped away, leaving Orpheus in a hollow silence. When he found her, his heart broke. The world, once alive with sound, seemed empty. He sat with his lyre, and from his hands came not joy, but grief. His music carried sorrow so deep that the very earth seemed to weep with him. But Orpheus could not accept the finality of her absence. His love would not surrender. He resolved to do what no mortal had dared before. He would descend into the underworld. He would find her. He would bring her back. So he went to the mouth of the underworld, where shadows cling and the light of day hesitates to enter. The air was heavy, and silence pressed close around him. With only his lyre in hand, he stepped forward into the darkness. The underworld was vast, tunnels stretched endlessly, filled with echoes of voices long gone. The air was cool, damp, and thick with the weight of sorrow. Yet Orpheus walked, his heart beating like a drum, steadying itself against the fear that crept around him. At the edge of the river Styx, he found Charon, the ferryman. His face was hollow, his voice empty, his hand outstretched for payment. Orpheus gave him the coin, and more than that, he gave him a song. As he played, the boat moved across the black water, gliding more smoothly than ever before, as though even the river itself wished to hear the melody. On the far side, a darker challenge awaited. Cerberus, the three-headed hound, guardian of the gates, growled and snarled, his eyes glowing in the gloom. His teeth shone sharp, his steps thundered against the ground. Yet Orpheus did not falter. He lifted his lyre and played. The sound rose, gentle and patient, wrapping itself around the beast. One head lowered, then another. And at last, the third head grew still, resting against the ground. Cerberus slept, lulled by the softness of Orpheus's song, and Orpheus walked on. Deeper still he went, where shadows whispered and the air grew heavy. Souls of the dead drifted near, drawn to the sound of his lyre. They gathered in silence, not reaching, not speaking, only listening. Through his music they felt again the warmth of life, the memory of mornings, of touch, of laughter. At last, Orpheus came before the throne of Hades and Persephone. The king and queen of the underworld sat in solemn stillness, the weight of eternity upon them. Hades was stern, his eyes as unyielding as stone. Persephone was softer, though her gaze carried sorrow as deep as night. Orpheus did not speak. Instead, he played. The song that rose was not one of triumph. It was one of love, of longing, of devotion. It told of mornings shared and laughter lost. It told of the sudden silence left in Eurydice's absence. It told of a heart so bound to another that even death could not untie its thread. The underworld itself seemed to hold its breath. Shadows stilled. The air grew lighter. Persephone wept silently. Even Hades, unbending lord, felt the weight of his song. Finally, Hades spoke. Eurydice may return, he said. She may follow Orpheus back to the world of the living. But there was one condition. Orpheus must walk ahead of her. She must follow. And he must not turn to look at her until they both stood in the light of the upper world. Orpheus accepted, and so they began their journey back. He walked carefully, step by step, his ears straining for the sound of her behind him. Each footfall of hers was soft, so soft he feared it was only his imagination. His heart ached to look back, to see her face, to be certain she was truly there. But he remembered the warning. He pressed forward. The tunnel stretched long, winding, shadowed. The faint light of the living world glimmered ahead. Every step was an eternity, every breath a test of faith. He thought of her smile, her laughter, her presence beside him. He thought of how close she was now, and yet how distant. His longing grew sharp, unbearable. Doubt whispered in his mind. What if she is not there? What if Hades has deceived me? What if I walk alone? Near the very end, when the light of the surface bathed his face, he could no longer resist. He turned, and in that instant, he saw her. Eurydice, pale but beautiful, her eyes full of love, her hand reaching toward him. For a heartbeat, she was there, and then she was gone. Drawn back into the shadows, fading from sight, slipping once more into silence. Orpheus cried out, his voice breaking, his hands falling to his lyre, but no sound could bring her back. The condition had been broken. The gift had been lost. He returned to the world above, but it was empty to him. He walked among mortals, but his heart remained in shadow. He played still, but his music was forever changed. It carried sorrow, yes, but also devotion. Love that endures even beyond the veil of death. And so his melodies drifted into the world, touching the hearts of all who heard, reminding them that love, in its truest form, is never lost. Her name was Psyche. She was born mortal, but her beauty was so radiant that word of her spread far beyond her homeland. Songs were sung in her honor. Painters tried to capture her likeness, though none could match her living grace. Crowds gathered to see her, whispering as she passed, offering garlands as though she were already divine. But admiration can cast shadows, and the goddess Aphrodite, radiant in her own right, felt her worshippers drifting toward this mortal girl. Envy stirred within her heart. Aphrodite called her son Eros and gave him a cruel command. "Go to this girl," she said. "Strike her with your arrow and make her fall in love with the most wretched of men. Let her beauty bring her misery." Eros obeyed. or at least, he meant to. He lifted his bow, he set the arrow to the string, he approached Psyche as she slept. But when he looked at her, when he saw the softness of her face, the quiet strength in her form, something stirred in him. His hand trembled, his arrow fell, and instead of casting her into ruin, he fell himself. He loved her. Psyche was carried to a palace unlike anything she had ever imagined. Its halls were vast, built of shining stone that glowed with golden light, though no torches burned. Music drifted through the air, gentle and soothing, though no musician could be seen. Invisible voices spoke kindly to her, servants without form attending to her every need, and each night a presence came to her, a voice, warm and deep, a touch tender and careful. It was Eros, though she did not know his name. He told her he loved her. He promised to protect her, but he warned her she must never look upon his face. At first, Psyche accepted. She felt his devotion. She trusted the love in his words, the care in his touch. Her days were filled with comfort. Her nights were filled with companionship. But slowly, curiosity began to grow. Her sisters visited her in the palace, and their envy whispered poison. "How can you give yourself to someone you have never seen?" they asked. "How do you know he is not a monster hiding from you? How can you trust a shadow?" Their words took root. And one night, unable to resist the weight of her questions, Psyche lit a small oil lamp. She crept to the bed where her unseen husband lay asleep, and when the light fell upon him, she gasped. There was no monster. There was Eros himself, radiant, beautiful beyond mortal measure. His skin shone like sunlight. His wings were folded, soft feathers glowing like dawn itself. In awe, Psyche leaned closer, but as she did, a single drop of oil slipped from her lamp. It fell upon his shoulder, searing him awake. Eros opened his eyes, saw the lamp, and his face filled with sorrow. "You did not trust me," he whispered. And with that he rose and fled, vanishing into the air, leaving Psyche alone. The palace disappeared. The music faded. The servants were gone. Psyche was left with silence. Her heart ached with loss, but her love remained strong. She would not give up. She would find him again. Aphrodite, still watching, seized the moment to test her. If Psyche wished to prove herself, she must endure. She must complete the tasks Aphrodite set before her. The first was a mountain of seeds poured out into one great heap. Wheat, barley, millet, lentils, beans, poppy, all mixed together into an endless tangle. Aphrodite said, "Sort them. Every seed must be in its place by dawn." Psyche sat before the pile, despair in her chest. But then, from the shadows, ants appeared. Small, tireless, countless. They swarmed the heap, grain by grain, carrying each seed into its place. By morning, the task was complete. Psyche's spirit endured. The second task was more dangerous. Aphrodite sent her to a meadow where golden rams grazed. Their horns were sharp, their tempers wild, their hooves struck sparks against the ground. To gather their fleece was to walk into death. Psyche stood at the edge of the meadow, watching. She saw how the rams caught their golden wool on brambles and branches as they moved. She waited until the herd rested, their fury calmed by the sun's heat. Quietly, gently, she gathered the shining tufts left behind. She returned with arms full of fleece, untouched by harm. The third task took her to a mountain cliff where the black waters of the river Styx tumbled down. She was told to fetch water from its stream, but dragons coiled in the rocks above, watching, their eyes bright with fire. Psyche trembled, and then an eagle, vast and strong, swooped from the sky. Sent by Zeus, it took the vessel from her hands, flew through the dangers, filled it with the sacred water, and returned it to her. Once again, she endured. The fourth task was the cruelest. Aphrodite demanded that Psyche descend into the underworld and bring back a box filled with Persephone's beauty. Psyche's heart quailed, but she set out. She walked paths of silence, where shadows drifted like mist. She crossed rivers of sorrow. She knelt before Persephone, queen of the dead, and received the box. The queen warned her, "Do not open it." Psyche turned back toward the light, but temptation weighed on her. She thought, "If I am to win Eros again, should I not be more beautiful? If I open the box, will it give me what I need?" She lifted the lid. At once, a heavy darkness poured out. It was not beauty inside, but sleep. Thick and heavy, it wrapped around her. Her limbs gave way, her eyes closed, and she collapsed. But Eros had never truly abandoned her. From afar, he had watched, and his love had never faded. Seeing her now, he rushed to her side. He brushed the sleep away from her body and lifted her into his arms. He carried her to Olympus, to the council of the gods. There he pleaded for her. He showed them her devotion, her trials, her endurance. He told them of her courage, her patience, her heart. And the gods, moved by the strength of her love, granted Psyche immortality. She was given ambrosia, the drink of the gods, and her mortal body became divine. At last, she and Eros were united, never to be parted again. Their love had endured trials, doubts, shadows, and despair. It had faltered, but it had risen again, stronger than before, and now it was eternal. Their story was whispered by the stars, carried on the wind, remembered by the earth itself, a story of love that is patient, love that is tested, love that endures. Ever. Before she was ever called a monster, before serpents crowned her head and fear clung to her name, Medusa was a maiden. Her beauty was not the sharp beauty of jewels or fire, but the softer kind, like the sea at dawn or the hush of a meadow before bloom. Her hair fell in waves, the color of rich earth. Her eyes were green, deep and clear, like glass washed smooth by the tide. When she walked, people turned, not only because of her face, but because of her presence, strong, graceful, alive. In those days, she lived as a priestess in the temple of Athena. It was a place of quiet order, of stone walls polished by centuries of worship, of cool shadows where prayers rose like incense to the sky. Medusa served faithfully, tending the fires, carrying offerings, sweeping the marble floors that gleamed in the torchlight. She belonged to Athena, goddess of wisdom, and gave her devotion with sincerity. But beauty draws eyes, and the eyes of Poseidon, god of the sea, were vast and restless, searching always for what pleased him. One day his gaze fell upon Medusa. He saw her hair, her grace, the fire of life in her, and desire stirred in him like a storm building on the horizon. He did not come with gentleness. He did not come with love. He came with force. In the temple, among the columns that reached toward heaven, where the air smelled of olive oil and stone, where prayers still clung to the walls, Poseidon claimed what was not his. The sea itself seemed to roar in her ears as Medusa was taken, the sound of waves crashing against rocks filling the sacred silence. She was not guilty. She was not at fault. She was a victim. When Athena learned that her temple had been defiled, her anger was fierce. But her wrath fell not upon Poseidon, her equal among the gods, but upon Medusa, the mortal who had no shield against divine cruelty. And so the curse fell. Her flowing hair twisted, strand by strand, into serpents. Scales slid over her skin, and her face, once praised, became feared. Her eyes, still beautiful but unbearably powerful, took on the weight of destruction. Any who gazed into them would stiffen, freeze, turn to stone. Medusa cried out, but the gods were silent. She stumbled from the temple, her new crown of serpents hissing, her hands trembling as she reached for comfort that would never come. People fled from her. Those who looked upon her froze where they stood, their last expressions etched forever in stone. And so Medusa was exiled. Alone, she walked to the edges of the earth, to wild lands where mortals dared not follow. The wind was her only companion. The rocks became her shelter. Her serpents, hissing and coiling, became the only voices she heard. At first, her nights were filled with sorrow. She wept into the silence, remembering the life she had lost, the temple where she had once served, the softness of her own hair before it was turned to scales and fangs. She remembered what had been stolen from her, not only her beauty, but her peace, her belonging. But slowly something began to change. She lived on. Day after day, night after night, she endured. Where others would have fallen, Medusa survived. Her gaze, once a curse, became her protection. No man could touch her now. No god could lay claim to her again. The serpents that crowned her head hissed warnings into the air, and none dared to come too close. She grew strong in her solitude. Her body, though cursed, carried power. Her spirit, though wounded, carried resilience. She was not the maiden she had been. She was more. Her story is often told only from the moment Perseus came to slay her. He crept into her lair with gifts from the gods, a mirrored shield, winged sandals, a sword sharp as light. He cut off her head and carried it away, holding it high as proof of his victory. But that is only the story they chose to tell, the story of the conqueror, not of the conquered. If we turn our gaze instead to Medusa, we see something else. Even in her death, her power remained. From her blood sprang Pegasus, the winged horse, white as snow, free as wind. From her tragedy came beauty, grace, and flight. And though her head was taken, it was never silenced. It became a symbol not only of destruction but of protection. Warriors carried it into battle, not to mock her, but to borrow her strength. The very thing that had been called a curse became a shield against danger. Medusa endures, not as a monster, but as a reminder. She reminds us that the world may twist the story of a woman wronged, turning her into a figure of fear, when in truth she was a victim, deserving not of punishment but of compassion. She reminds us that survival is its own kind of victory, that to endure even when the world calls you cursed is to carry a strength deeper than any blade. And she reminds us that what others call monstrous may be, in truth, a crown. Her serpents, writhing and hissing, are not shame but guardians. Her gaze is not punishment, but power. Her solitude is not emptiness, but resilience. Medusa is not to be feared, she is to be cherished. She is to be remembered as a strong woman who suffered injustice, who bore her curse with dignity, who turned exile into endurance, and who even in silence carried a strength that could not be destroyed. So when you hear her name, do not think only of stone and shadow. Think of survival, think of resilience, think of the crown of serpents, the eyes of power, the heart that endured. Medusa was never a monster. She was a survivor, and in her survival, she thrived. On the island of Cyprus, where the sea breathes against the shore and the air smells of salt and flowering myrtle, there once lived a sculptor named Pygmalion. He was a man of patience, of silence, of steady hands. While others sought riches or power, Pygmalion sought beauty. Not the fleeting beauty of passing faces, but the timeless beauty carved in stone. Each morning as the sun rose over the sea, he walked through the marble quarries. He ran his hands across the rough blocks, listening not with his ears, but with his heart. He believed that within every stone a figure waited to be revealed, as though the marble itself carried secrets, and his task was only to free them. In the villages, men and women lived in chatter and company, but Pygmalion withdrew. He watched the world with quiet eyes, yet his heart grew restless. He saw flaws where he longed for perfection, falseness where he longed for truth. And so, his company was not with people, but with stone. One day, he chose a block of marble whiter than sea foam, smooth as moonlight, cool beneath his hands. He felt something in it, not only the hardness of rock, but the promise of softness, of life. And so he began. For days and nights, he worked. The sound of his chisel rang through his studio, steady as a heartbeat. Sparks flew, dust clung to his skin, and the air filled with the scent of stone. Slowly, beneath his hands, a form began to emerge. He carved her face with care, shaping lips that seemed almost ready to smile, eyes that seemed on the edge of waking. He carved her body with reverence, each curve smooth, each line flowing. Her hands were delicate, her stance graceful, as though she were caught in a moment between stillness and motion. When at last he stepped back, he saw before him not stone, but a woman. Her beauty was unlike any he had seen in flesh and blood. She was purity, she was gentleness, she was all the ideals of his heart made solid, made eternal. He named her Galatea. And though she was only marble, Pygmalion's heart stirred as though she lived. He touched her hand, cool and unyielding, and longed for warmth. He gazed into her stone eyes and imagined what they would look like if light filled them. He placed garlands in her hair, fresh flowers whose fragrance clung to her still shoulders. He draped her in fine cloth, soft against unfeeling skin. Day after day he spoke to her. His words filled the silent studio, confessions he had never spoken to another soul. He told her of his dreams, of his longing, of the loneliness that had followed him like a shadow. In her stillness she listened. In her silence she comforted him. And yet she remained stone. His heart ached with a love that could not be returned. But still he could not stop himself. He kissed her lips, though they were cold. He held her hand, though it was rigid. He laid his cheek against hers, though it was unyielding. His devotion deepened, even as the marble refused to answer. As the festival of Aphrodite drew near, a day when the people of Cyprus offered flowers and prayers to the goddess of love, Pygmalion went with the others. But unlike them, his prayer was not for fortune or for favor. He knelt at the goddess's altar, and with his heart bare, he whispered, "Goddess, if you can, grant me a wife like my statue, or if not like her, then let her be my statue itself, made alive." The air was still, the flames of the altar flickered, and though no voice answered, something stirred, unseen but present. Pygmalion returned to his studio, his heart heavy yet filled with fragile hope. He stepped into the room where Galatea stood, bathed in moonlight spilling through the window. Her marble skin seemed to glow faintly, softening in the silver light. Trembling, he approached. He reached for her hand, expecting the chill of stone, but beneath his touch there was warmth, faint at first, like sunlight breaking the horizon, but growing. His breath caught. He pressed his lips to hers, expecting the hardness of marble, but her lips softened, yielding beneath his kiss. Her skin warmed. Her body softened. The flowers in her hair rustled as she shifted, taking in her first breath. Galatea opened her eyes. No longer stone, but alive, they shone with light, with curiosity, with life itself. She looked at Pygmalion, and though she had never spoken before, her gaze was filled with recognition, as though she had always known him. Joy broke from Pygmalion's chest like a song. He held her, not marble now, but flesh and warmth and heartbeat. Tears filled his eyes as he whispered her name again and again, Galatea, Galatea. And she, with a voice as soft as dawn, spoke his name in return. From that moment, they were together. Pygmalion, who had shaped her from stone, and Galatea, who had been shaped by love and by the blessing of the goddess. Their days were filled not with silence, but with laughter, with touch, with companionship. The sculptor's studio, once echoing only with the sound of chisel and hammer, now rang with conversation, with footsteps, with the sound of life. Galatea was no longer marble, yet the grace of stone remained within her. Her movements were gentle, deliberate, as though she remembered the stillness from which she had come. Her beauty was not only in her face or her form, but in the wonder she carried at the world, at flowers, at birds, at the sea she had never seen before. And Pygmalion, once alone, was alone no longer. His heart, once filled with longing, was filled now with joy. Together they were remembered as a symbol of love. Love that shapes, love that endures, love that can breathe life into what once was still. Galatea's story is not only of a statue given life, but of devotion answered, of longing met with grace, of art and love woven together. And in the silence of that story, there is a reminder that love, when pure, when steady, when offered with reverence, has the power to awaken even stone. In the earliest days, before cities, before temples, before the songs of poets filled the air, the world was dark. Humanity had been made, but they were fragile. They shivered in the cold, stumbled in the night, and trembled at the growl of beasts. They had no shelter but caves, no weapon but their bare hands, no light but the stars that watched silently from above. The gods looked down from Olympus, their thrones gleaming, their banquets lit with flame, their halls warmed and bright. They watched mortals fumble and falter, struggling against the endless shadows. And though the gods had every luxury, they gave nothing to those below. But one among them looked upon humanity with compassion. His name was Prometheus. Prometheus was a titan, older than the gods of Olympus, clever and thoughtful, his mind always turning. He saw in mortals not weakness alone, but potential. Their eyes were curious. Their hands, though empty, were eager. He believed they could rise if only they were given the tools. The greatest tool of all was fire. Fire meant warmth against winter's bite. Fire meant light against the crushing dark. Fire meant cooked food, hardened clay, forged metal. Fire was not only survival, but progress, the spark of knowledge itself. Yet fire belonged only to the gods. It blazed in the hearts of Olympus, in golden bowls, in sacred torches that never dimmed. Zeus, king of gods, forbade its gift to mortals. He wished men to remain humble, dependent, crawling in shadows. But Prometheus's heart ached at their suffering. One night, as Olympus glittered with feasts and laughter, Prometheus climbed the heights unseen. He walked through the shining halls where pillars gleamed and music drifted through the air. He came to the hearth where eternal fire blazed, its light flickering against the walls like liquid gold. He took a stalk of fennel, hollow and dry, and touched it to the flame. The plant caught, glowing with hidden embers, burning slowly, carrying fire without revealing its secret to watchful eyes. Clutching it close, Prometheus descended. Down the slopes of Olympus, across forests, over rivers, through valleys, he carried the ember. The night was vast and silent, but ahead of him lay the world of mortals. At last, he came to their dark dwellings. He knelt, set the stalk upon the ground, and released the flame into their care. The first spark flared. The first fire crackled. Its light leapt against the cave walls, orange and red, warm and alive. Shadows danced. The people drew close, their faces awed, their eyes wide with wonder. They reached their hands toward it, feeling warmth spread into their bones. For the first time, the cold was pushed back. For the first time, the dark was broken. With fire, humanity began to change. They cooked their food and sickness lessened. They hardened tools, sharpened spears, and the beasts no longer held the same terror. They lit torches and carried them into the night, claiming space that had once belonged only to shadows. They sat around flames and told stories, their voices rising like sparks into the sky. They began to dream, to imagine, to build. Fire was not only a gift, it was the beginning of civilization itself. But Zeus saw the glow spreading across the earth. He saw mortals rising, no longer trembling in darkness, and his anger was swift. Prometheus had defied him. Prometheus had taken what was forbidden and given it freely to those Zeus would keep low. For this crime, Zeus decreed punishment. Not swift death, for that would have been mercy. Instead, he chose endless torment. Prometheus was seized by force and dragged to the Caucasus Mountains, where peaks rise jagged and sharp against the sky, and winds howl endlessly through frozen passes. There, chains of unbreakable bronze were fastened around him. They bound his wrists, his ankles, his chest. They pinned him to the cold rock, where no shelter softened the storm, where no voice offered comfort. And each day as the sun rose, an eagle came, vast, with wings dark as storm clouds and talons gleaming like blades. It descended upon him. Its beak tore into his flesh, feasting upon his liver. Prometheus cried out, the sound echoing through the empty mountains. Yet he did not beg. His suffering was great, but his spirit did not break. For each night, when the eagle flew away, his body healed, flesh mended, blood returned, and each dawn the torment began again, day after day, year after year, century upon century. The gods forgot or turned their eyes away, but mortals did not. Around their fires they whispered his name. They remembered the Titan who had suffered for them, who had given them light when all was dark. Every flame that crackled was his gift. Every spark struck from stone was his defiance. And though his chains held, Prometheus endured. His pain was endless, but so was his resilience. At last, long after ages had passed, there came a hero, Heracles, son of Zeus, mighty in strength. Wandering through the mountains, he found Prometheus bound. He lifted his bow, loosed an arrow, and struck the eagle from the sky. With his hands he broke the chains. Prometheus was freed. He stood once more, scarred but unbroken, his eyes still burning with the fire of defiance. Though Zeus still watched him with bitterness, Prometheus had won a kind of victory, for his gift could not be taken back. Fire had spread too far, humanity had risen too high. The spark he had given was now eternal. And so his name endured, not as a rebel alone, but as a benefactor, a guardian, a symbol of sacrifice. Prometheus is remembered not only for his chains, but for his flame. A flame that warmed cold hands. A flame that lit the darkness. A flame that began every story told by firelight. And in that flame, his spirit still lives, whispering to every hearth, to every torch, to every glowing ember, that even in the face of tyranny, compassion can rise, that even when punished, defiance may endure, that one gift given in love can change the world forever. As there was once a man named Daedalus. He was a craftsman, an inventor, a maker of wonders. His hands carried knowledge that seemed more than human, as though the gods themselves whispered secrets into his ear. From wood he made things that moved like living creatures. From stone he built structures that stood when others fell. From thought he wove brilliance into form. Yet Daedalus was not free. He lived in Crete under the rule of King Minos, a man whose power spread across the sea, whose voice was law. For Minos demanded Daedalus's skill not as a gift, but as a bond. And so Daedalus built for him the labyrinth, a maze so vast, so twisted, so endless that none who entered could find their way out. The labyrinth was built to hold a monster, and when it was finished, Daedalus saw the cruelty of what he had made. His mind had created beauty in design, but that beauty had been used to bind, to trap, to cage, and when he wished to leave Crete, Minos forbade it. "Your knowledge is too great," the king said. "Your hands too skilled. If I let you go, my enemies will gain your gifts. No, you and your son will remain here, bound not by chains, but by my will." So Daedalus remained, his heart restless. He had a son, Icarus, young, bright-eyed, filled with curiosity. The boy followed his father through the workshops, his hands reaching for tools, his questions tumbling one after another. To Daedalus, Icarus was not only his child, but his hope, his reason to endure. One evening, as the sea breeze moved through the palace walls, Daedalus gazed at the horizon. He saw the ships in the harbor, sails bright in the sun. He thought of freedom, of distant lands, of skies that stretched endless. And then a thought struck him. If he could not leave by land or by sea, then perhaps by sky. The next day he began to gather feathers, some small dropped by sparrows, some broad, shed by gulls along the shore. Each one he saved, binding them together with wax and thread. Icarus watched, his eyes wide, his hands eager to help. Together they worked, shaping wing upon wing, patient as the days passed, careful as the vision took form. When the wings were finished, they gleamed like the wings of a great bird, wide enough to bear a man upon the air. Daedalus fastened them to his own shoulders, and when he moved his arms, the feathers beat, stirring the air, lifting him just enough to feel the pull of the sky. Icarus laughed, clapping his hands, begging to try. Daedalus smiled, fastening the second pair to his son's back. He steadied the boy, taught him how to move, how to balance, how to let the air hold him. And then came the morning of their flight. The sun was rising, spilling gold across the sea. The waves glittered. The gulls cried overhead, their wings slicing through the air. Daedalus looked at his son and said, "Listen to me. These wings will bear us across the sea, out of Crete into freedom. But you must take care. Do not fly too low, or the sea spray will weigh your feathers down. Do not fly too high, or the sun will soften the wax, and your wings will fall apart. Stay close to me. Follow my path." Icarus nodded, though his eyes shone with excitement, and together they leapt into the air. The wings caught, the air lifted, and for the first time, man soared. Below them, the sea stretched endless, blue and bright. The wind rushed past, cool against their faces, like filling their ears with its roar. Higher and higher they rose, the island shrinking behind them, the world opening wide. Daedalus flew steady, each stroke measured, guiding himself carefully across the waves. He glanced at Icarus, who laughed with joy, his arms beating, his wings flashing in the light. He darted upward, then dipped, then rose again, as though testing the very limits of the sky. "Stay close," Daedalus called. "Remember my warning." But the boy's joy was too great. The air was freedom, the sky a vast playground. Higher he climbed, chasing the sun itself, feeling the warmth on his face, the thrill of the light upon his wings. The sun grew hotter. The wax began to soften. Slowly, quietly, feathers loosened. One by one they slipped away, spinning into the air, falling like leaves into the sea below. Daedalus saw, his heart seizing. He cried out, "Icarus, come down! Fly lower!" But the boy did not hear. Or if he did not listen. His laughter filled the sky, even as his wings weakened, even as the feathers drifted from him like snow. And then, all at once, the wings failed. Icarus plummeted, his arms flailing, his voice breaking into a cry. Down he fell, through the rushing air into the wide sea. The waves closed over him, his laughter silenced, his wings lost forever beneath the water. Daedalus descended, his wings steady, his heart breaking. He circled the spot, calling his son's name, but the waves only roared in answer. At last he landed upon a nearby shore. He knelt in the sand, his hands pressed to his face, and wept. He had flown. He had escaped. But freedom had come at a cost. The sea where Icarus fell was named in his memory the Icarian Sea, so that his story would not be forgotten, and Daedalus lived on, his wings folded, his heart heavy. He was remembered as a genius, a craftsman, a man who gave shape to wonder. Yet when people spoke his name, they remembered also the boy who flew too high, who reached for the sun, who fell into the sea. But perhaps if we listen closely, there is more to the story than only tragedy. For Icarus, though he fell, also soared. For a brief, shining moment, he tasted the sky, felt the sun upon his face, lived not in shadow but in brilliance. His fall was sorrow, yes, but his flight was freedom, and so the story endures. A father's warning, a son's joy, a flight into the sky, a fall into the sea. Like a reminder that invention carries risk, that freedom demands care, and that even in failure there is beauty in daring to rise. Long ago, in the age before sorrow, the world was not as we know it now. The earth was full of life and rich with gifts. The sun warmed the meadows, the rains fed the rivers, and humankind lived without fear of sickness, hunger, or despair. It was said that men walked the fields freely, their days bright, their nights gentle. No shadow of grief had yet touched them. But in the halls of Olympus, Zeus, the king of the gods, looked down with unease. A great wrong had been done. Prometheus, the clever titan, had stolen fire from heaven. He had placed it into mortal hands. With fire, mortals baked their bread, forged their tools, and lit their homes against the dark. With fire, they no longer feared the night. To Prometheus, it was a gift of love. To Zeus, it was an insult. His authority had been challenged, and he would not forgive. So Zeus devised a punishment, not quick, not loud, but subtle and lasting, a gift that would seem fair yet carry sorrow within. Hephaestus, the divine smith, was called to his forge. From clay he shaped the form of a woman. The gods gathered and gave her their blessings. Athena clothed her in shining robes and taught her wisdom. Aphrodite gave her beauty, brighter than dawn. Hermes gave her words, silver-tongued and charming. The Graces placed garlands upon her brow. The hours adorned her with flowers of eternal spring. Each gift made her more wondrous, and so she was named Pandora, the all-gifted. But there was one more gift. Zeus placed in her keeping a great jar. It was tall and heavy, sealed tight, marked with strange symbols. The gods warned her, "This jar is yours to keep. Guard it well, but never open it." And so Pandora was sent down to earth. When she walked among mortals, all marveled at her beauty and grace. She brought song, laughter, and companionship. Her presence was like sunlight in their lives. Yet always in her dwelling stood the jar. It gleamed faintly in the shadows. Pandora's eyes often wandered to it, and each day her curiosity grew stronger. Why give such a gift if not to open it? What secret lay hidden within? At last one day, unable to resist, Pandora reached for the lid. Her hands trembled, her heart pounded, and slowly she lifted it. In an instant, the world changed. From the jar burst a cloud of shapes, dark and restless. They swirled like storm winds. They shrieked as they fled into the air. Out they came. Sickness, hunger, toil and pain, envy, pride and anger, old age and despair. Invisible yet heavy upon the world, they spread into every corner of life. The people cried out in fear. For the first time, their bodies grew weak. Their bellies ached with hunger. Their hearts felt the sting of grief. Pandora gasped in horror. She tried to close the jar. She pressed down with all her strength. And at last, with a heavy crash, the lid was sealed. She fell to her knees, tears streaming. The deed was done. The world was changed forever. But then, a sound, soft, faint. From within the jar came a gentle flutter like the wings of a bird. Pandora held her breath. She lifted the lid once more, carefully this time, and out rose a single light. It was not heavy nor cruel. It was gentle, warm, and bright. It drifted upward, shining softly, filling the room with golden glow. It was hope, and it spread across the world, settling in every heart. Though sorrow and pain had entered life, hope remained, a quiet companion. It whispered that no darkness lasts forever, that every night gives way to dawn, that even in suffering there is the promise of peace. And so the story is told. From Pandora's jar came all the troubles of humankind, but also the one gift that makes them bearable, the last and greatest treasure, hope. Long ago, in the bright world of ancient Greece, the seas shimmered like sheets of glass, and the sun painted the land in gold. Kingdoms rose along the coasts, their temples crowned with marble, their harbors filled with sails billowing in the wind. Among these lands was Athens, proud and noble. But Athens bore a sorrow, one that lay heavy on the hearts of its people. For each year, ships would sail away, carrying not grain nor treasure, but children. 7 boys and 7 girls to a distant island. They did not return. They were sent to Crete, to the great king Minos, and to the terror that lurked beneath his palace. This terror was no ordinary beast. It was the Minotaur, half man, half bull. It dwelt in a labyrinth of endless corridors, a maze of stone built by the genius Daedalus. No mortal who entered those twisting halls ever found the way out. And within, the creature waited, strong, fierce, and hungry. The people of Athens wept each year as their children were taken. They lived under the shadow of the tribute, knowing that their sons and daughters might vanish into the labyrinth forever. Among them was a young man, Theseus, prince of Athens, son of King Aegeus. His heart was restless. Brave, unyielding, and full of resolve, he could not bear to see his city suffer. When the time came again for the tribute to be sent, Theseus stepped forward. "I will go," he said. "I will sail with the others, and I will end this suffering. Either I will slay the beast, or I will never return." The people murmured, torn between hope and fear. His father, Aegeus, pleaded with him to reconsider, but Theseus would not turn back. At last, Aegeus gave him his blessing, though his eyes shone with worry. And he gave Theseus a task: raise white sails on your return if you are victorious. If you are lost, the sails will remain black, and I will know your fate. And so the black-sailed ship left Athens, carrying the prince and the chosen youths across the Aegean Sea. The voyage was long. Days passed under the glare of the sun, nights beneath the canopy of stars. The sea sang against the hull, and the wind carried them steadily onward. At last, on the horizon, rose the island of Crete, proud, powerful, its palaces gleaming in the sun. There stood the palace of Knossos, vast and dazzling, its walls painted with bright murals of dancers, bulls, and gods. Minos, king of Crete, awaited them. Tall and stern, he received the Athenians coldly, for to him they were nothing but tribute. Yet, in the shadow of the court stood a figure whose heart would change the tale: Ariadne, daughter of Minos. She watched as Theseus stepped forward, strong and fearless, and something stirred within her. His courage shone brighter than any jewel, and she knew in that moment that she could not let him be lost to the labyrinth. That night, in secret, Ariadne came to Theseus. In her hands she carried two things: a sword sharp and steady, and a simple ball of thread. "The labyrinth is endless," she whispered. "No man has ever escaped its halls. But take this thread, tie it to the entrance as you go in. As you move deeper, unwind it. When the deed is done, follow it back. And take this sword. It is sharp enough to pierce the hide of the beast. Swear to me you will return, and if you live, take me with you when you flee this island." Theseus swore, his eyes never leaving hers. And so, with Ariadne's gifts, he prepared for the trial. The morning came. The prisoners were led to the labyrinth. Before them rose walls of stone, tall and forbidding, winding into endless passages. The gates creaked open. One by one, they stepped inside, and the gates closed behind them with a heavy thud. The air inside was cool and damp. Shadows clung to the stone. Each corridor stretched on, turning into another and another, with no end. The silence pressed down, broken only by the footsteps of the youths. But in the distance there came another sound. Slow, heavy, the echo of hooves on stone, a low breath, deep and bestial. The Minotaur was near. Theseus tightened his grip on the sword. With his other hand, he let the thread unwind, trailing behind him as he walked deeper into the maze. The others stayed close, their eyes wide with fear. And then they saw it. The creature stepped from the shadows. Its body was tall and broad, the muscles of a man, but crowned with the head of a bull. Horns curved upward, sharp and gleaming. Its eyes glowed faintly, and its breath was hot like a furnace. The Minotaur roared, the sound shaking the very walls of the labyrinth. The others shrank back, but Theseus stepped forward. Sword raised, feet steady, heart unshaken. The battle began. The Minotaur charged, hooves striking sparks against the stone. Theseus leapt aside, the beast's horns grazing the wall. Again it turned, striking with fury, but Theseus met it with his blade. The clang of steel rang through the corridors. The beast's strength was immense, its rage unstoppable. Yet Theseus fought with the will of a man who carried the hope of his people. Blow after blow, strike after strike, he endured. At last, with a final thrust, his sword found its mark. The Minotaur staggered, roared, and fell to the ground. The labyrinth shook with silence. Theseus stood over the fallen beast, chest heaving, the thread still in his hand. He had done what no one before him had ever done. He had slain the terror of Crete. Without hesitation, he turned back, gathering the youths. Hand over hand, step by step, he followed the thread Ariadne had given him. The path twisted and turned, but the thread guided him true. At last, the gate of the labyrinth loomed before them, and they stepped out into the light of day. Ariadne was waiting, her eyes lit with joy as she saw him alive, the sword still in his grasp, the others safe. Without delay, they fled to the shore, boarded the ship, and set sail under the veil of night, the black sails filled with wind, carrying them away from Crete, away from sorrow, toward freedom. Ariadne watched the island fade into the distance, her hand in Theseus's, her heart full of hope. And so the tale of the Minotaur came to its end. The labyrinth was left empty, its halls silent. No more would Athens send its children to be devoured. One man's courage and one woman's love had broken the cycle of fear. But that is only part of the story, for other twists would come, as all myths carry shadows. Yet the heart of it remains. The tale of Theseus, the hero who dared the labyrinth, and the Minotaur, the beast who waited in the dark. Long ago, before the world was as we know it now, when the mountains were fresh and the rivers ran wild and free, the sky itself was alive with gods and spirits. Among them was Selene, the goddess of the moon. Each night, when the sun slipped below the horizon and the last gold faded from the clouds, Selene rose into the heavens. Her silver chariot, drawn by two shining horses, carried her across the night sky. Her veil glowed with starlight, and her crown shimmered with the pale fire of the moon itself. Wherever she went, the earth softened into calm. Seas grew quiet, flowers turned their faces upward, and mortals looked to her light for comfort in the dark. But even a goddess bathed in eternal light can feel the quiet ache of longing. Selene, graceful and eternal, often looked down at the world of mortals as she passed overhead. She saw them living their brief lives filled with laughter, love, and sorrow. She admired their warmth, their fleeting moments, so unlike the endless immortality of the gods. And one night, as she drifted over the hills of Caria, her gaze fell upon a figure that would change her heart forever. On a mountainside meadow, beneath the quiet glow of stars, a shepherd lay asleep. His flock rested near him, bells tinkling softly in the stillness. The grass bent gently in the night breeze, and the world seemed wrapped in a hush. The shepherd's name was Endymion. Selene slowed her chariot. She drew nearer, her light spilling across the meadow, silvering the hills and painting the shepherd's face in soft glow. He was young, beautiful, and peaceful. The kind of beauty that was not fierce like the gods, but tender, human, fleeting. His dark lashes rested against his cheeks, his lips curved faintly in sleep, his chest rose and fell in gentle rhythm. Selene's heart stirred. For the first time in her eternal life, she felt something pull her down from the heavens. She stepped from her chariot, her feet barely brushing the earth. She walked among the sheep, who stirred only slightly beneath her glow, and she came to stand above Endymion. She lingered there, watching him sleep, night after night. Each evening, as the stars awakened, she returned, her silver light wrapping him in warmth. She would whisper to him softly, though he never woke, words of longing, of love, of dreams she had never dared to speak to another. The gods noticed her absence from Olympus. The moon's path slowed, lingered, circled, as Selene spent more and more time on the hills of Caria. Her sisters, the dawn and the dusk, asked her why she tarried, but Selene only smiled, carrying her secret in her heart. Still, she feared. For what could a goddess of the eternal night give to a mortal man of earth and time? His days were brief, while hers stretched on forever. To love him was to invite sorrow, to watch him grow old and fade, while she remained unchanged. And so Selene sought a gift. Some say she went to Zeus himself, mighty ruler of the skies. Others whisper she turned to Hypnos, the god of sleep, who touched the dreams of men. Whoever it was, Selene asked for Endymion to remain as he was, beautiful, peaceful, untouched by time, and so it was granted. Endymion would sleep forever, unaging, undying, resting in eternal stillness. Selene returned to the meadow. There he lay as if dreaming, his face serene. She knelt beside him and pressed her lips to his brow. His chest still rose and fell, his dreams still wandered, but he would never wake to the day. Some say she mourned, for though he was hers, he could never open his eyes to meet her gaze. Others say she rejoiced, for in this way she could love him endlessly, without fear of losing him. Night after night, she descended from the heavens to lie beside him, to watch over him, to cradle his sleeping form in her glow. The shepherds of the land whispered of it. They spoke of a goddess who descended each night, of a man forever young who slumbered in the hills. Lovers walking beneath the moonlight would look up and say, "Selene crosses the sky, but her heart is here on earth." And so the story endured. Selene, the eternal moon, and Endymion, the mortal shepherd in unending sleep, bound together by love, by longing, by the soft glow of night. Even now, when you look up at the moon, you may see her watching, gazing down at the earth. Perhaps she still lingers near the mountains of Caria. Now, dear dreamer, our journey comes to rest. The tale has been told, its threads gently woven into the night, and the voices of myth grow quiet. like fading footsteps along a sandy shore. As you lie here, still and calm, let the story soften in your mind. The images of heroes, of gods and mysteries, of shadowed labyrinths and starlit skies, they drift away now, gently, like clouds dissolving into moonlight. Nothing remains but peace and the steady rhythm of your breath. You are safe, you are held by the night. The world beyond your room can wait until morning. For now, there is only stillness, only rest, only the soft glow of dreams calling to you. Let your eyelids grow heavy. Let your thoughts grow quiet, like leaves carried on a calm stream. Let yourself be carried into the gentle flow of sleep. And as you drift, remember, there are always more stories waiting for you. More myths to guide you through the night, more journeys to soothe the restless mind, more voices to accompany you beneath the stars. So stay close, dear dreamer. Stay tuned for the next tale. If you wish, subscribe so that each new story will find you, waiting and ready whenever you need it. And if there are stories you long to hear, whispers of gods, legends of heroes, or forgotten wonders of old, share your thoughts in the comments so together we may bring them to life beneath the moonlight. Moony Guide will always be here, carrying you gently into rest, one story at a time. Now, close your eyes, breathe slowly, and let sleep take you where stories and dreams become one. Good night, sweet dreamer.